Now I'd like to show you how you can work with layer styles and text inside of Photoshop CS5. I'm currently working with the dream1.psd image. This image is available to you if you'd like to follow along with me. It's in your assets. And take a look over at the layers panel. You'll notice we have 3 layers. We have a white background layer, the dream text layer. This is an editable text layer. We can edit the text with the type tool. And above it, we have an image that's clipped to the text. That's the sky image. This is a transparent image layer. If I option click or alt click between these layers, I can release that clipping mask, and you can see what's really going on. There's the unclipped image. Option or alt click again between these 2 layers to create that mask once more. With the move tool, we can then move this around inside of the text characters, change the crop of the image inside of the letters. Very cool effect. Now I want to take this to the next level by applying some layer styles to the dream text layer. So the first thing I want to do is select that layer inside the layers panel. That tells Photoshop that we're going to now apply styles to this layer and this layer alone. The next thing I want to do is go into the window menu, scroll down to where it says styles, because I currently don't have my styles panel displayed. Believe that it is displayed by default in the default workspace. So if you don't already have this open and available to you, you will want to choose that in order to display the styles panel. The reason I want to display the styles panel is because there are some layer styles, combinations of layer styles, that are already saved and available to you in Photoshop. You may not realize this, but there's all kinds of different style combinations that you can apply to your layers, including editable text layers. So let's take a look in the panel menu here. Down here in this third group, these are all the different groups that ship with the product. And we're viewing the default group right now, but what I want to do is choose web styles all the way at the bottom here. Select that one. When you do, this warning dialog box is going to appear and ask you if you want to display just the web styles group of styles, or do you want to append what's already in the list, meaning that we would see what's already displayed here and the new group. I'm going to click OK to just replace what's in there. And now we're just viewing the web styles, no longer viewing the ones that were there before. And the one that I'd like to apply is this one over here. It's a type of clear gel type effect. Click on that. All I have to do is click on it in the list. And when I do, you'll see what happens. It applies all of the different layer styles to my text. They're displayed down here inside of the layers panel. Notice what happened to the layer as well. Off to the right, we've got this little icon that says Effects and a little arrow, up, down arrow. If we click on that, we can show or hide that list of layer style effects that are applied to the layer. So now we're hiding them. If you need to refer to them, click it again, and then you can see everything that's applied. You can also show or hide all of the effects at once by clicking the visibility icon, which is the eyeball, next to the word effects, and now we're just viewing the text layer again. All of these are grayed out. Turn it back on, and now we're seeing the effects again. Alright, so it's kind of nice to see the building blocks of what makes this particular style. Drop shadow, inner shadow, outer glow, inner glow, bevel and emboss, color overlay, and satin. Those are all different types of layer style effects, and this combination is what creates this really cool looking glass type of web button effect. Pretty cool. It doesn't necessarily have to be used for web. Even though this particular style, this group of styles was named web styles, doesn't mean you have to apply these just to web graphics. You can use this for a print graphic. Okay? This happens to be a 300 ppi resolution image, which we could certainly use for commercial printing. Alright, the only thing is I want to modify a few things about these settings with these styles. I actually want to add another style to this as well. So what I wanted to illustrate to you is not only are these layer styles available to you, they come with the product, but you can also edit them. You don't have to necessarily use them as they are. Okay, so let's go take a look at this. First thing I want to do is edit the drop shadow, because that looks a little far away to me. That makes sense to do that for a website design, but not necessarily for a print graphic, and which is what I think I would probably use this for. So if I double click on that, it's going to open up the layer style dialog box and take me directly to the drop shadow panel. As you can see over here, we have drop shadow highlighted. And here are all of the settings that make up the drop shadow for this style. I want to change a few things about it. First thing I want to do is change the opacity level. It's currently at 70. It's already highlighted for me, which is kind of nice, because then I can just type in the value. I know I want it to be darker, so I'm going to type in 90%. Keep in mind, we've got preview checked over here, which means that we can refer to the image in the background, move this out of the way, and see what's happening. It's definitely much darker. This is the shadow that we're referring to and what we're changing. All right, I also want to change this angle here. I can do that by typing in the value or by dragging this guy around. You see what's happening to this little icon to show us where it's at when we do that, and then of course it will update with your preview turned on. Let's turn this around to about 149, 150, somewhere in there. Okay, that looks pretty good. The distance, I think, is a bit far, as I was saying before, for print, so I'm going to bring that down to about 28 or so. I'm going to leave the spread where it's at. I kind of like it nice and tight at 0. And I'm going to decrease the size to 32. And what I'm doing there is making the drop shadow not quite as soft. That's what the size slider actually controls. Although it says size, it really should say softness, hardness, because as you drag to the left, lower values make the shadow harder, and drag it to the right, not only expands everything out, it makes it softer. Okay? All right, the noise is at 5%. It's always a good idea to have a little bit of noise in your drop shadow, I think, especially when you're creating a graphic for commercial print. It just looks a little more photographic when you output the files. Interesting that they have 5% included in here for web style, but it works for me either way. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that. The next thing I want to do is add a stroke, and I can do that by clicking on the stroke option over here in the left, and it's giving me the default stroke settings over here in the center of this panel, of this dialog box. I, of course, want to change those. Always changing things up. That's the whole idea here, is trial and error, playing with these settings. I'm going to first increase this from 3 pixels to 8 pixels. All right, so we've got a nice, thick, black stroke outline. It's not going to stay this way, though. We're going to make it look better, I promise you. The position is outside, and I want it to be centered, because I think it's touching too much in between the letters, with the letters, current letter spacing. By doing that, it's spacing it halfway on the outside and halfway on the inside of the character, and that looks much better to me. Half and half. Blend mode, I'm going to keep to normal. The opacity, I'm actually going to lower down to about 45% or so. 45, 50, somewhere in there. That's starting to look good. That's allowing us to see through the color to the image underneath it. Okay, that it's covering up on half of the stroke. And then we can also click in here, maybe make this a gray instead of a black. Even though we lower the opacity, I think I also want to make it a lighter gray. Somewhere in the middle here, just by dragging that up in our color picker. Click OK to apply that, and now it's starting to look the way I want it to. The idea here is to create a little bit of definition around the edges of these letters, and maybe have the color of it match the darker midtone areas of the clouds inside the letters. That's where I was going with this. Rather than sampling a color, I just kind of eyeballed it, but it's a really nice complementary effect, I think, between the gloss of the gel button, the content inside the characters, which is this grayish white cloud, and then the drop shadow. Okay, so just a really nice transition, I think, visually. So that's why I've chosen these settings. The rest of these settings for things like inner shadow and outer glow, I'm not going to change. I certainly encourage you to play around with these and see if you can improve the effect or make it more to your taste. That's the whole idea behind layer styles. But for now, I think this looks good. So in the interest of time, I'm going to click OK to apply the changes that I've added and take a look at my effect. This is already looking good. I want to take this, of course, one step further, though, because I just can't leave it alone. It's just the way I am. I'm going to go ahead and make a selection of this text, and the quickest and easiest way to do that is to Command-click on the Mac or Control-click in Windows on the type icon in the layer. Do that, and we get a selection of our editable text. Keep in mind, this is completely editable. Everything here, the layer styles, the crop of the image, the text itself, the text formatting, all of this stuff can be edited. That's just the best and most creative way to work. All right, so now that we have our selection, what I want to do is contract the selected area by the same amount as that stroke. Okay? Because we're selecting the outside area. We're going to choose Select, Modify, Contract. Old school feature here in Photoshop. I have 8 pixels already set in here. That's what I want to use because if you remember, in the stroke setting in the layer style, I typed in 8 pixels. So we'll click OK. That's going to contract by 8 pixels. You can see where the marching ants have moved now to the inside of that centered stroke. And that looks really good to me. Next thing I want to do, select the sky layer in the layers panel. That doesn't lose my selection. It just changes what's selected in the layers panel. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to add an adjustment layer using this selection and converting it into a layer mask to be used with that adjustment layer on a layer above the sky image that's clipped to this text. Sounds confusing, but it's really not. What we're going to do is go down here, click on the adjustment layer icon, scroll all the way up to the top in this flyout list and choose solid color. I'm going to choose a blue by moving the hue slider up to about here. Select a pretty saturated blue. You can see what's happening in the background. It's applying this blue to the interior of the letters. The reason for that is because the selection that we had is now converted into a layer mask for the solid color layer. All right? I know what you're thinking. Why did we cover up the sky? I'll show you why. We're going to click OK to apply this color. Next thing I want to do is apply a blend mode to this solid color adjustment layer. The blend modes are up here at the top of the layers panel, and I want to choose screen, which is right here. Okay, and there it is. What that did is it took this blue color, this saturated blue, and using the screen blend mode, blending that color with the colors in the sky. Okay, so we're getting this heightened, highly saturated cyan effect that we can only get by blending the two colors together. I mean, I could go in here and I can adjust the colors for the sky image layer, but why do that when I could just get the effect so quickly and easily by applying a blend mode to the adjustment layer above? All right, so to recap what we did here real quickly, using that contracted selection so we're not affecting the border, but only the interior, it converted that selection into a mask. Black conceals, white reveals, so white is revealing this color over our image inside the text. And then by applying that blend mode, it's heightening the color. Okay, also recapping down in here, the layer styles that are applied to the dream text. We started out with a web style that ships with the product. After applying that, we made some changes to the drop shadow settings. We also added a stroke. After applying all that, we get this effect that we have right here. Okay, so remember, there are styles available here inside of Photoshop. You don't always have to use their settings. Sometimes they're a great starting point for something much better. Okay? Try them. See what happens. Experiment with the settings. Play around with the settings. That's why they're there. Okay? When you find something you like, you can move forward and maybe play around with adding to it by applying adjustment layers like I did just here.